Second Peter 2, and we are in verse 6. He says, "And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly." So he said, I did all of this on purpose so they would stand as an example to everybody to look at and know. Now, I know it's for more than just a human example, it's for the angelic example as well. He's connected it to Noah right before him. Okay, so let's find out about these ungodly folk. There's something special, not in a good way, but special about Sodom and Gomorrah. That God destroyed it with fire and brimstone. There's a lot of ungodly mess that goes on and always has. And God's not chosen to burn them down with ashes, burn them down by fire and brimstone. But there was something extra heinous about this, and God said, I'm going to make an example of that that has boiled my blood. Look at it in Jude 1, verse 7. He says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering vengeance of eternal fire. So there's more to it than just the burning down of the Sodom and Gomorrah. He says they're suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. That is, we think of hell as being, outer darkness and flames that last forever. But there's more to it than that. It's the vengeance of God. God has vengeance. He has wrath that lasts eternally. People say forgive and forget. Well, God sure doesn't. Matter of fact, that's what hell's all about. He doesn't forget. That vengeance lasts for eternity. In Ezekiel 28, verse 2. Mm. To those angelic beings, this of course is a reference to Lucifer, but the same would hold true to all of them. He says, Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am God, I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas, yet thou art man and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. This is classification fusion at its worst. An angelic being is actually higher than man. But what he's not higher than is God. And he said that angelic being decided he was going to lift himself up higher than God. God says, when you did that, I'm going to make you lower than man. They're going to die like men. Whew. Genesis 3, verse 15. Genesis 3:15. Now that Genesis 6 there, we found the angelic beings coming down and messing around with humans. And so more than likely something happened. We saw it in the Bible. He talked about the giants being born. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a seed. That was a passing on of a demonic thing and a human, and it produced a giant. In Genesis 3, verse 15, here's God's curse. He says, I will put in between, he's speaking to Satan, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed, the serpent's seed, and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now, we've seen what happened. These beings came down, and obviously that produced an offspring. So that's of the devil, that's demonic. There's a whole theory, and you can go off the deep end with it, called the seed of the serpent. That's the name of it. And they go wild and talk about how that there's two populations on Earth right now: a population of demonic beings that don't have a soul and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's the seed of the serpent. And then there's humans. I don't buy into it wholeheartedly. However, there is some element of truth to it. Luke chapter 3, verse 7. Luke 3, verse 7. We saw that demonic offspring was here in the Old Testament, and obviously it was present in Jesus' day. Luke 3, verse 7. This is John the Baptist. Then said he unto the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, O generation of vipers. What's a viper? It's a serpent. Isn't that what Satan was? He said, your seed's going to bruise his heel and he's going to bruise your head. John the Baptist said, I see a bunch of little vipers out here. What a way to preach to people, but there may be more to it than figurative speech. He says, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Now, this is an odd question. Wouldn't he have been glad that people were getting that message, fleeing from the wrath to come and coming to hear him preach? Now, if he was speaking to a demonic creature, that might be fitting. Who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? A demonic creature. Isn't that what the demons showed up to Jesus and said, don't torment us before our time? It's all fitting. There was some entity there beside human, I think. Look at it in John 8, verse 44. John 8:44. Here's the best way to find that wicked population. You find them in the religious crowd. John 8:44. Jesus says, "You're of your father the devil." Whoa, they've got a daddy, and their daddy is the devil, like Genesis 3:15. "And the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." So he says, like father, like son. That's what they are. John 17, verse 12. Here's another famous one that was obviously of the devil. John 17:12. He says, while I was with them, Jesus' high priestly prayer here. He says, while I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me, I've kept, and none of them is lost, but one is the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. One is lost. Yes, he is. Literally. Look at it in 1 John 3. 1 John 3. 1 John 3, verse 12. Now, here's where you can jump off the deep end. 1 John 3:12. In Genesis 3, the context to this verse is Genesis 3. That's the curse. And immediately after the curse, Eve has two boys. He says here, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous. Now, he says that Cain was of that wicked one. Now, I know you can take it to mean that he was a follower of the devil, of philosophy or theology of the devil, demonic things. He wanted his own self-will, and what he liked, he wanted God to be okay with. But there might be more to it than that. He said he was of that wicked one, as though he was a seed of the devil. I'm not going to say it one way or the other. Y'all study it out and figure out what you want to think about it. Revelation 2. Revelation 2, verse 20. Revelation 2:20, it says, notwithstanding, I have few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. Now, at the time of the writing here, this is, they say 90 AD, 90 to 100 AD. Jezebel's been dead for thousands of years. But I don't believe it's addressed to anybody in 90 or 100 AD. It's addressed to a church that's going to show up in the tribulation. because it's written to an angel, not to an individual. Therefore, maybe Jezebel shows up again too. Literally. She was demonic. She was of the Zidonians, and her dad was a priest. But she brought in Baal worship to Israel. And that's exactly what he says is going to go on again in Israel. The same curse. Here it is, right back again. The same woman, Jezebel. You know what's connected with it? Fornication. The very thing they do in the pagan temples. That's part of the worship service. Look at it in 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23:13. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had builded for Ashtaroth, the abominations of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Malcolm, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. Solomon was responsible for putting in all this wicked, godless worshiping of pagans. Now the Bible tells us why. He says, if you marry outside of Israel, what's going to happen is those pagan women are going to turn your heart to the other gods. And that's exactly what happened. It's heart trouble. Look at it in 2 Chronicles 21. 2 Chronicles 21, verse 5. Joram was 32 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. Okay, so let's find out about him. Verse 11. Moreover, he made high places in the mountains of Judah and caused the inhabitants of Jerusalem to commit fornication and compelled Judah thereto. This pagan worship is just like he says in Revelation, and just like he lays at the feet of Jezebel, is that's part of their service. Now, we know that's going to be a fact because you can't turn on the TV, an advertising or anything, and they not refer back to something sexual. That's they describe things as being sexy, which have nothing to do with that. They're trying to get everybody accustomed to that, so that when the Antichrist shows up and that becomes part of the temple worship, it'll go hand in hand and no eyebrows raised. Genesis 6, verse 4. Genesis 6:4, he says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. That is a menacing phrase right there, and also after that. People skip over that a lot of times, or they just don't connect it to what he's saying. He's saying there was giants then and ever since. And also after that, and here's when it happens, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, seed of the serpent. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The same became, did I read that right? The same became mighty men. Yeah, which were of old, men of renown. Okay. Numbers 1, verse 16. Here's these renowned men. These were the renowned of the congregation, princes of the tribes of their fathers, heads of thousands in Israel. So this would be like the mayors, the governors, that type of a thing. They were some sort of a leader of people in Israel. Now, I'm not saying they were demonic. What I'm saying is when they died off, that's the body that a spirit being would want to go pick up and inhabit because they already had a claim and the following. And so that's the body they would choose. He said the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Look at it in number 16. Number 16, verse 2. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly. famous in the congregation, men of renown. Renown just means somebody who had a following. They were celebrities. Be careful of celebrity Christianity. It ain't all it's cracked up to be. Jude, verse 8. Jude, verse 8, he says this: Likewise, these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominions, speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring railing accusation against him, but said, The Lord rebuked thee. That's something. Now, it's interesting that there's always a three in everything. There's an unholy trinity that is three. God, of course, is a trinity. Not only that, you've got three famous children that were born to Adam and Eve: Cain, Abel, and Seth. You've got three that Noah has: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You know about three angelic beings' names: Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer. Isn't that something? There's always a three in that. Look at it in verse 14, Jude verse 14. He says, And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints. That's seeing way out in the future because it hadn't happened yet. We're part of those saints he's seeing. And he's worked up about it. And all the way back there, he walked with God. They had a one-on-one relationship. And he got some information there that most people didn't have. And he says, God is mad, and he's coming back, and he's waiting until he's got a big army, and he's coming back with them, and he's going to wipe this mess out. And he is. Look at it in verse 15. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Now, that's the world we're in. The world we're in is ungodly. If it's got anything that's connected to the real God in it, they want to run from it. There's a repulsion. Look at it in verse 18. He says, How that they told you there should be mockers in the last time, who should walk after their own ungodly lusts. They're not afraid to mock Christianity. I think that's on the rise. You'll see that the TV shows are all, if they've got anything religious in it, it's done in such a way that it gives a bad representation of religion. It makes no sense. They have the homosexual in every show. They're less than 1% in America. You know what's a great percentage in America? Christians that go to church. How come that's not in every show? If you're just representing what the population is, that ought to be in every show. But it's not. When it shows up, it's talking about what an idiot they are. 2 Peter 2, verse 7. 2 Peter 2, 7. He says, And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. So he's setting up something here. You're either just or you're unjust. That's the Old Testament sense of it. And still, in a sense, it is ours too. We're justified by Jesus Christ. Look at it. He says in Genesis 19:16. Here's this just Lot guy. And while he lingered, I wouldn't say that's too just. The angels are saying, get out of Sodom and Gomorrah. God's done with this place. We're going to destroy it. And he sees how wicked it is. Could you imagine that angelic being shows up there and, pure righteousness and holiness. And he's preaching about how wicked this place is and God's going to destroy it. And you say, well, let's hang out a little while. That's what he said. He lingered. When his wife did it, she turned into salt. She became a salt shaker. The men laid hold upon his hands and upon the hands of his wife, and upon the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. Now, God's point of view and man's are many times different. God said he was just. Mm. Yeah. I'm glad that's the classification you gave him, because I can get one too. You and I are just as wicked as him in some area. You can count on it. To some degree, if men compare themselves with men, he says it's not wise. Compared to God, compared to Jesus Christ, we're all wicked. However, God's made a way that we can be considered just. Now, if he can do it for Lot, then he's made the way for me through Jesus Christ. That's a good deal. The blood, that's right. Look at it in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. He said God was merciful to Lot, bringing him out, according to Peter, because he was just. So if we're justified in the beloved, Jesus Christ, then God's going to be merciful to us too. Now, it's popular in certain groups for people to ignore the mercy of God unless they've been called on the carpet. Then suddenly they want to turn to the mercy of God. There's two sides to God: pure and holy wrath and anger, but there's also pure mercy. Abundant in mercy is how he puts it. He says in our passage, 1 Corinthians 10:13, there is no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. I like to say of this verse, it means just what it says. It does not say there is no temptation tempted you. And that's the way most people read it. The verse says there's no temptation taken you. You fell for it. But such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. Now, just like he did for Lot, many times we fall for the wrong trick of the devil. But he says, even in the midst of that temptation, God's still going to be merciful and give you an escape route. Doesn't mean that you won't feel like part of your coat is turning to salt. But he does provide a way of escape. It wasn't pretty for Lot once he got up in the mountains. He's got a bad reputation. His descendants do. They became enemies of Israel the rest of their days. However, he escaped. God gave him a good write-up. He's just. He said about Lot that he vexed his soul. That is, he was grieved. That's something that the city people probably didn't see. Something we wouldn't have noticed. It's something that was seen in the spirit realm. The angels knew. Obviously, God knew. But he said his soul was vexed. Christians should be vexed by the unholy conversation of those around us. Now you should open your mouth when God allows it, and when he says to you to open it and gives you what to say. However, you always should be vexed in your spirit. Otherwise, they've won. The devil wants to continually bombard you with harassing filth until you become accustomed to it. Never become accustomed to it. In your spirit and in your soul, be grieved by it. Now, says Lot was. When that mess was going on around him, it vexed him. It hurt him deeply. Look at it in Genesis 19. Genesis 19, verse 7. This is Lot's response to these wicked men trying to defile anything they can find. Here's Lot's answer. And said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. I wouldn't call any of those idiots brethren. But he said, "Do not so wickedly." Now, that was a sting for them because finally he'd come out and said something against them. No doubt it had been building up in him. It said he vexed his soul from day to day. So it had been building, and finally it poured out, and he called wickedness wicked. At some point, God does the same with us. If you'll be grieved in your spirit by the wickedness around you, at some point God will say, "Go sick them." And he will. He'll give you the words and the ability to do it. Look back at Genesis 13:13. Here's this thing that is so wicked that's being pushed, of course. He says, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly." You know, that 13 is the number of rebellion, and this is rebellion doubled. They turned the volume all the way up. Sodomy is wicked, and he says right here, the people involved in it are sinners before the Lord exceedingly. As though there's levels, there's degrees of sin. There are. And he says this one is exceedingly wicked before the eyes of God. And we have the proof for it because he said, "I lit that one on fire just so everybody could see it." And so it's being pushed nowadays. 2 Peter 2, verse 8. "For that righteous man," speaking of Lot, "dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds." 2 Peter 2, verse 8. Yeah. He says that Lot vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Now, let me ask you something. Wasn't Lot one of the rulers of the city? He sat in the gate, of course he was. Didn't he write the laws for the city? Sure. He sure enforced them. He says what they were doing was unlawful deeds. I bet they didn't think it was unlawful. The whole city, young and old, came out to participate in it. They thought it was all legitimate. Not God. God says it was unlawful. That a man knows between himself and God that it's wrong. I don't have to preach him a sermon on it. He already knows it. That's like murder. You don't have to tell someone murder is wrong. He knows it. This is another one. Sodomy is wrong. Look at it in Romans 2. Romans 2, verse 9. Romans 2, verse 9, he says, "Tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil, of the Jew first, and also of the Gentile." Okay, the Gentile doesn't have the law of God. But he's saying even a Gentile can do evil. And he says what God does is he inflicts him with anguish and tribulation. Those sodomites are very troubled. They're not really happy. They call them gay, but there's nothing happy about it. This is a curse of God. One of the unwritten rules or the law of God is this: if you're going to go against what he put in place, what's going to happen is you're going to be unhappy. Bible calls it tribulation and anguish. Now it's in your soul. So it changes the personality. And it does. Watch somebody who's been in that lifestyle for many years, and they're a miserable, angry type person. Worst customer we ever had was one. Tried to sue us. Just pure wickedness. He would call at 3 and 4 in the morning and call Toby all kinds of horrible names. And wicked, wicked, just pure wickedness. Let's put, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's real, but I think it's put on. The lisp. Yeah. Oh yeah, you know how a homo talks. A male that talks like a female. Many of them do. If they're wanting to if they're wanting to represent the female in the relationship. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a normal thing. Is they start sounding, acting, they lose the ability to hold their wrists straight. No strength. Probably. Yeah. There's something. Either it's put on by themselves and they know they're doing it, or something has taken over their body. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably demonic. In Romans 2, verse 14, he says this is very interesting. He says, "For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another." God says, I've written certain laws in every man's conscience in his heart. So he knows he's crossed the line in certain areas. One of them's murder. Here's another one, homosexuality. Look at it in chapter 1, Romans 1, verse 19. He says, because that which may be known of God, the unwritten law, is manifest in them. God's put his law, certain laws he's put into every man. For God hath showed it unto them. Gentile. Every man knows certain laws that God has. Now, he gave Israel all of his laws and his statutes and commandments, but he handpicked a few of his choicest, do not cross this line, and made sure everybody got it. Look at another interesting passage, Mark 6. Mark 6, verse 18. I've always had a little question mark when I read this story. This is where John the Baptist loses his head. He's at the birthday party of Herod. Herodias has been dancing. Here's the reason for it. He says in Mark 6, verse 18, "For John said unto Herod, It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife." Says who? Not Rome. Rome didn't care. So he's forcing a law of God onto a pagan Gentile and calling him on the carpet for it. Whew. That's one of those unwritten laws of God. He should have known, and God revealed it to him. And John the Baptist shows up as the second witness and says, You know that's against God and that's not lawful. He was not a Jew. He wasn't following the law. Nothing in there says that he knew the Old Testament laws about all of those things, incest and so forth. But here, John the Baptist shows up and says, I'm going to put it on you because you already know it. Now, that's tough. That tells me that when you know a law of God, you can preach the law of God, period. If it applies to you, more than likely, God's been speaking to someone else about it too. Go ahead and open your mouth. 2 Peter 2, 2 Peter 2, verse 9. We'll end on a happy note. 2 Peter 2, 9. He said, The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. That is, God has determined these wicked people I'm going to set a place and a time and a system in place so that I can give them their due punishment. But he said he's going to deliver the godly. Look at it in Job 5, Job 5, verse 19. Job 5:19. If you're prone to trouble like every man is, every human has problems, and we never really learn our lessons, it seems like. We have to keep repeating them. If you're honest, you'll know that's the fact. You'll find great comfort in this verse. Job 5, verse 19. He shall deliver thee in 6 troubles, yea, in 7 there shall no evil touch thee. Now, I'll give you the doctrinal for it. Doctrinally, of course, we know Job is a picture of the last half of the tribulation. 42 chapters in it, 42 months in the tribulation. Job stays on his property and he gets everything. There will be some that endure to the end and then get the kingdom. Okay, so that's the picture of the last half of the tribulation. And so there he's talking about he shall deliver thee in 6 troubles, 6 years, and in 7, the 7th year, no evil shall touch thee. That's how long the tribulation is. But just to take it in a spiritual sense, that's the fact. It seems like we fall for troubles over and over and over, and God always delivers us. That's because God knows how to deliver the righteous, the godly. Look at it in Psalm 34. Psalm 34, verse 15. Psalm 34 is a good chapter to memorize. It said, the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears open unto their cry. That is, they've got problems. People think you get saved and everything goes great for you. Baloney. You're just flesh like everybody else. He says, the face of the Lord is against them that do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all their troubles. You can put a big amen beside that, because he has done it for you in your lifetime up to this point. Now, tomorrow the devil's going to say, here's some trouble that he can't deliver you from. You can just point him to that verse right there and say, the Bible says he's going to deliver me out of all my troubles, and he's already done it my whole lifetime. Why would I question it now? Verse 18. The Lord is nigh unto them that, don't lose my place here. The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. It's not a get out of jail free. Being saved is not a lucky rabbit's foot. He says, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. Twice he's told us something. You're going to have trouble, and God's going to get you out every time. Now, that'll leave you on a happy note right there.